Welcome back to All Talk with Tom Jordan and Kevin Dees. I was asking Kevin the other day if for perhaps some mandate came down from on high, like from the governor's office, and Kevin was appointed to be a U.S. senator, like to fill a vacant seat. Would he do it? You don't have to campaign. You just get the seat. He said, no way. And not a chance would I ever go into Congress or run for Senate or be in one of those seats. The pressure's too immense. And I feel the same way. It's a tough gig, whether it be Senate or maybe a House in Congress, House seat. And a lot of sitting members are kind of feeling, it seems, the same thing. Just look at the upcoming 2024 congressional races. They're set to experience significant turnover. 29 House members and 7 senators, including some prominent figures from both parties, are announcing their decision not to seek re-election. What is going on here? What are the ramifications of this exodus from Capitol Hill? Let's go to Professor Dave Dulio, Director of the Center for Civic Engagement and Political Science Professor at Oakland University. Dave, good to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
So what do you make of this? What's happening on Capitol Hill? This seems abnormal to me that, about 36 members on Capitol Hill are fleeing Capitol Hill.
Well, I can see why you would say that, right? Because we tend to think of members of Congress as sticking around election after election after election, right? Once they get in, they stay in. But actually, the numbers that we're seeing of retirements or folks choosing not to seek re-election to their current seat is pretty much in line with historical trends. And I would say that can happen for a number of reasons. Number one, let's not forget that, no offense, but many of these folks are up in age, and maybe they just figure it's time to, hang them up. Several are, as in past years, looking to run for another office. We see oftentimes House members try to get a Senate seat, right? And in the case in point here in Michigan, Alyssa Slotkin not running for re-election in her House seat because she's going to run for Senate. And then there's the political aspect of it, the strategic aspect of it. A lot of times we will see incumbent members of Congress retire or look elsewhere when they think that it's going to be a bad year for their party. And that certainly happened in 2022. We saw Democrats, in terms of retirements, far outpace Republicans. And we're actually seeing that this year, too. Of those 7 Senate members that are not running for re-election, 5 of them are Democrats. And of the 29 House members, 20 of them are Democrats. So I think there's a lot going on. There's not one thing that explains it all, but a couple of when we sit down and really go through it, some things that make a lot of sense.
Okay, so you think there's potential. I think what you're saying there, kind of reading between the lines, is that maybe the Democratic Party is going to some of these current sitting members of Congress, or maybe someone in the Senate, say, listen, I think it's time to move on. For the betterment of the party, we're going to ask you to step aside so we can bring in so-and-so or such and such.
In fact, I would say that's possible. I think the realization, however, is on the part of the individual office holder, where they're looking at it saying, "Oh boy, this is going to be a tough election cycle. Do I really want to go through it again and have to raise $1, $2, $3 million to defend my House seat? I'm in a tough district. Maybe the chances are higher that I'll lose this time." And we see that with many members, again, who might be up in age, who just say, you know what, I've had my run, I'm done. I'd rather retire than lose.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, this is like a constant running for election, especially in the House. I mean, in the Senate, you can do it every 6 years. It's a bit of a different story, but it's still a rigorous process trying to campaign for a seat. But with the House, it's every single 2 years. You got to do it again. And we just spoke with Dan Kildee the other day, and he said, listen, it's time. He didn't say the word exhausting, but it is tough on one's personal life, isn't it? I mean, your family life. You're going to D.C. at least for 1 week at a time. Sometimes that stretches into 2 or 3 weeks. Your family, in his case, back in Flint, Michigan area. It's tough. It's a tough go on the personal lives of these members, isn't it?
It most definitely is, right? And I think that Congressman Kildee, makes a good point about how exhausting it can be, and it's the travel, it's the demands of the job when somebody's in D.C. It's the vitriol that is part of politics these days, right? And when you were making your opening comments there about Kevin not wanting any part of this, that's a reaction that a lot of folks who, frankly, would be really good public servants have, where they just don't want to deal with it. They don't want to have to go through the hassle and the negative aspects of either running for or serving in Congress. And you see some other folks like Mitt Romney give up his seat. Joe Manchin, right? These are long-standing members with really good reputations, and they've sort of thrown their hands up in the air saying, you know what, I'm out.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if you're not a big fan of migraine headaches, you probably don't want to run for office. That's my feeling anyway. I think Kevin would agree with that. So let's look politically. Democrats facing more competitive open seats. As you mentioned, there's more of them leaving than Republicans. But does that put them at a disadvantage in the upcoming elections, or are these kind of safe seats, generally speaking, as you look across the landscape?
There's a mix. There are some seats, say in the House, excuse me, that are being given up by folks in California. And some of those folks are running for that open Senate seat in California. Some of those House seats are certainly safe. But then, there are others across the country that are much more competitive. And I think that, whether or, how those turn out, it depends on who the parties have recruited to compete in those seats, whether they've been able to get a star candidate. And how good a fundraiser those folks are going to be, and how well they're going to be able to connect with voters in their districts. I think that the two open seats that we have here in Michigan, the seat that Congresswoman Slotkin is vacating, and the seat that Congressman Kildee is vacating, are going to be really fascinating to watch as we go through the next 11, 12 months, and see. Not only how the folks that are competing campaign, but how much money is going to pour into Michigan from outside groups that want to be active here, because with a thin House majority, Republicans, if they lose a couple other seats, they're going to need to pick some up elsewhere to maintain their majority. And Michigan could really decide who holds the majority in the House and the Senate, for that matter. Absolutely.
And those two seats you mentioned, they're held right now by Democrats, but they are in districts that are very much, look at Slotkin's in a large portion of Livingston County, which is typically heavily conservative, but she's been able to pull it out now a few times. But she's going to have some, and same with Dan Kildee's district up in Flint. It seems to be more purple than it used to be. Always appreciate your perspective on this, and make sure you keep your students in line as you're rounding out the fall semester there at Oakland University. Professor Dave Dulio, Director of the Center for Civic Engagement and Political Science Professor at Oakland University. Good to talk to you, Dave. Thanks so much.
You too. Thanks for having me back.
Your call's up next, 800-859-0957, 800-859-0WJ.